Welcome everyone to our session today. My name is Arron, and I'm Associate Program Director at the School of Applied Leadership here at Senior University of Seattle. And helping me today, serving as, what's the right title? Moderator for this session is Dr. Rebecca Corey. And I'm just delighted to have her with us here. Now, the session is planned for about an hour. Might go faster than that, depends on what questions come in, but we're just excited to have the opportunity to share this information. And one of the questions that typically comes to me when I present this type of information is, what got me involved in this to begin with? And so I'll share the story with you as well. For years, I've been teaching courses, seminars, multi-day sessions on communication strategies. And it's not uncommon that in these types of seminars, there will be a section about dealing with challenging individuals. And you can define challenging however you want, but they are there, right? And within those sections of this type of training, it's not uncommon that we'll get into the question, well, what if that challenging person is the manager, right? Oh my goodness. And it doesn't matter where I'm at, what city I'm in, the size of the audience. I typically get some pretty consistent reactions, and they have to do with a lot of screaming. We'll tend not to get into that today. But also I will then ask, have you ever had a manager that wasn't particularly good at managing? And again, it does not matter the size of the room or the city I'm in. I would get hands like everybody in the room, right? It just seemed like it was the uncommon situation where we'd have a manager, somebody in charge, who wasn't particularly good at the job they had. And so I thought, okay, maybe we're onto something here. And so I thought it was probably, or would be a good idea to explore that topic a little further. And so I did what many people here in the Seattle area will do, and that is, create a website, of course, and sponsor a survey. And the question I'd asked, and of course we drew in many people into this, and we asked one relatively simple question: have you ever had a boss that was not so good? And again, the reaction. I suspect you may be in that situation yourselves, everybody on the session today. But the follow-up question was, tell us about it, and what would you have done differently? Now, the content for today's training is all about what people said they would do differently. But before I get into that, I'm kind of curious if I ask the same question today, what kind of information I would get. So take a few moments. If you've ever had a boss that's not so good, write down one or two words that describe the behavior that made him or her not so good, and type your responses in the chat box now. Again, and we don't have a lot of time for big, long narratives. I know many of you could probably go on for quite some time about this, but just a few words to highlight the behavior that wasn't so great. A liar, yeah. Can't get into that. Well, thank you for that input. Dr. Corey's helping me kind of highlight responses that are coming through, and I'm excited to say that many of these things we're going to address. Well, many of the things I learned back when I first provided that survey is what I'm seeing here right now. Now, we're not going to focus on the negative, but more so on the other part of the question I asked back in my survey was, what would be done differently? And so that's the idea. The survey we've got here, and you all read this replies: micromanaging, arrogance, lying, and favoritism. These are things that bad managers do, no doubt about it. We're going to focus on the good, but as a foundation for our work, we're going to look at the opposite side of this and share some ideas and thoughts that can help okay managers become better and better managers become really good, even great. So let's get into that. The first topic that was common, a common theme about what good managers did well, is they understand the difference between people and personnel. Now, people are the people that come to work, the folks that come to work every day. They're the individuals that the managers work with. They're the individuals that you work with. Personnel, on the other hand, that's the office that handles the people-related stuff. See, I'm afraid that sometimes managers get things mixed up. They tend to treat individuals as if they're not individuals, and that's not going to help. Because, in fact, good managers know that the people who report to them, the ones they work with, are people. They have ideas, feelings, ambitions, and what they say matters. So let's put it this way. The bad managers, they're out there yelling at people. They may be overburdening folks, perhaps giving unrealistic demands, perhaps even criticizing in public. You know, sometimes even people tune in to see that, but we don't like seeing it in the workplace, and good managers know this. Now, I'm not saying that a workplace is going to be all sweetness and light and everything's going to be perfect. There's stress in the workplace. This is not uncommon. But good managers know that common courtesy is in fact common. In fact, they expect it and perhaps even demand it. I'm going to use that word because this is what's necessary to get the work done. And the ways that I've found can quickly assure a more respectful work environment, a workplace, is when the manager has quality interactions with the individuals that report to them. They listen and they take note of what is said. They're helpful. They find ways to assist. They do not create roadblocks. They, in fact, work to take the roadblocks out of the way. And we'll get into that a bit later in the session as well. And they stay emotionally controlled. Not saying they never get upset, because things happen at work and people can get upset. But they show that, if they show it at all, they show it in very mature ways. They just talk about it. They figure out what can be done to maybe do things differently next time. It's really important that, and good managers get this, that they have an atmosphere of respect in the workplace. They treat people with respect, and they expect that of everybody on the team. Now, before I get any further, I am curious. I'm going to ask this from time to time throughout the session. Your thoughts. What are other quick and easy ways that respect can be created in the workplace? And here's something I also want to make sure not to give the wrong impression. I'm not saying every morning people need to join hands around the work desk and sing Kumbaya or We Are the World, right? It's just a matter of getting people to take time to recognize that everyone is a person and that they have thoughts, they have ideas, and that these things are important, because this is what good managers do. And the suggestions that are coming through are just great. Asking for the feedback, being honest with people, asking for ideas from them, and being, having integrity. And these are great suggestions. These are great ideas, and good managers do these things. Genuine interactions. Fantastic. I appreciate this input, because these are all great ideas that, if we're working with somebody that maybe needs some help, let's make sure to mention these ideas to them. Next thing we had, and the second thing we discovered among good managers is that they had a certain type of awareness. Actually, I found awareness to be kind of three areas of awareness. There's the individual level, which I think most people think about when we talk about a manager's awareness of their team. Then there's also team level awareness and what's happening in the organization and beyond. We're going to get into each one of these. Good managers know what their people are doing, um, and they make sure that they're doing the right thing. I have a friend in the speaking world, Hal Pitt, and he wrote a book called Unleashing the Power of Everyday Leadership. And the very first chapter of his book, it's many very short chapters, and the very first chapter says this: the number one job as a manager is to make sure the employees are doing the jobs they were hired to do. And as he goes on in the chapter, he speaks about these second things here, the need, what are their needs? And seeing that these needs are met, seeing that the roadblocks are taken out of the way. Again, good managers take roadblocks out of the way, they do not create them. And also, good managers, when working with team members, know what the goals are for that team member. What are their professional goals? And they help achieve those goals. They do what they can to give them opportunities to help realize their goals. This is what good managers do for their team members at the individual level. Now, the second area of awareness that good managers have is that team level, which refers to what's the team doing together? Are they functioning as they need to towards the goals that are most important for the organization? There's a saying I like to share. Way too many teams confuse being busy with being productive. And while busy is important, busy towards the right stuff is even more important. So keep that in mind. Good managers do. The second element at the team level has to do with how the team members are interacting with each other. This is a big one. Now, in fact, there's so much material on this that we're going to get into it as a separate topic later in the seminar. So stay in tune for that. Right now, I'll just say that a lot of the stress that comes to a workplace has nothing to do with the work. And this isn't the way it should be. Good managers take steps to ensure that doesn't inhibit the work for a team. And also, what is that team doing for the organization? And could they be doing more? At the individual level, we like to say if you are somebody who is seen as really necessary, in fact, crucial to a team, your position on the team is pretty well assured. And that's true for the whole team. The more that the team can do, the more likely they're going to be in that organization like glue. There's no getting rid of them. And this is a good thing. Good managers understand that it's not just a matter of contributing what your stated mission is, but in fact, how can you contribute more? So good managers focus on this at the team level as well. And this third level, now here we're getting beyond what most managers consider. But I'm here to give everyone the bonus plan. So here's the bonus plan. They'll think not only about the individual or the team within the organization, but what's happening with that organization, the large organization in the field, in the world, and how does what's happening with the world factor into what might be happening with the organization, or what are the future possibilities for the organization, given how the world might be changing. Important questions, and I have an example from the local economy to share with you about this. In our local economy, we have K2 Sports. Awesome company making great products, originally snow ski equipment. Now they're into bikes, they do rollerblades, but as I said, they're best known for their work in snowboarding and ski equipment, which for some reason my icon for that isn't coming up. Now, for some reason, well, we won't worry about it. Back in the early 2000, 2001, they announced that they were going to move their headquarters Their headquarters, by the way, they originally started on Vashon Island, which is a small island not too far from Seattle. I mean, that's actually just a quick ferry ride from Seattle over to the island. But a world manufacturing plant, as soon as the equipment comes out the door, it has to get on a ferry, then to a train or plane. Not the most efficient way of doing things. So one could predict, or maybe one could have predicted, that it was only a matter of time before they'd have taken their operation from Vashon Island to the main island, if you will, the continent, and brought it here into the Seattle city area. And my only question, because I remember so clearly that the newspapers and many of the people in the press and the media were saying, oh my goodness, what is this going to do to the economy? How are the people going to survive? Well, they're going to survive by bringing the ferry over to Seattle, and it'll be fine. But for those who maybe couldn't come over on the ferry to actually work locally with the company after they made this transition, I'm just wondering if the managers at that time may have foreseen this possibility, realizing shipping costs being what they are, any way you can save on shipping would be a good thing, which means they may likely move their operation from the Vashon Island area where they were to Seattle. And if they could foresee that, what were they doing to help people on their teams prepare either to make this move or find other work that would keep them there on the island? I don't know the answer to that question. I wasn't involved internally with the company, but it just hit me as a very strong example of field awareness for managers. And good managers will have this. Actually, great managers have this. It's not a common trait. Something to keep in mind. So again, for awareness, we have individual level, making sure to remove roadblocks. At the team level, we want to make sure the team is doing what they should be doing in the most effective way possible. And at the organizational level, helping team members and helping the organization see what's going on and doing what can be done to help stay effective in the role within the field. Now, third level has to do with delegation, the third area. And for this, I typically ask one question. I'm going to ask it here today. Anyone here in the training ever been micromanaged? I mean, just out of curiosity here. Yeah, a few people will say yes. Sadly true. Yeah, see, this also, back to that question about who's ever had a boss that wasn't so great, this too gets that hands up who hasn't been. And I can't explain why. I have no idea where this is coming from in the world, but it is a regular thing that not so good managers do. Real managers, good managers, the kind of manager you want to be, the kind of manager you no doubt are because you're already here in the session, understand what micromanaging is. They don't do it. And they do what I call real delegation. They practice real delegation. Now, for this area, to help people remember, I've got a quote that I'm going to draw from former President Reagan on, and it is not win one for the Gipper. I'm going to go with something else that he said, not as well known, but certainly more applicable to the situation here. Now, politics aside, I know that his time in office was a pretty popular time. It was pretty productive, and some may say it wouldn't have mattered who was in office. They would have had the same type of enjoyable experience. Recall in the 80s, our economy was strong, unemployment was down, the Cold War was coming to an end. And again, some might say this was due to what President Reagan was doing in office. Others would say it would have happened anyway. Even the fall of the Berlin Wall happened during his tenure. So by most people's accounts, that's not a bad gig, right? Not a bad time in office. And after he had left office, I wish I could remember the reporter, but he was being interviewed. It was nationally televised, and the reporter asked, he listed all these things, and he said, "How did you do it?" I mean, all these great successes, how on earth did you do it? And I remember so well, he just paused and he kind of looked down a little bit. Then he looked back up and he looked at the reporter and he said this: I put good people in place and I got out of their way. And I thought, wow, that sums it up. That's delegation in one quick phrase: putting good people in place and getting out of their way. The sad thing is, this doesn't happen nearly enough, but good managers do it. Now, being in academia, I can't just take this and not do something with it. So we're going to proceduralize it a little bit. We're going to come up with 3 steps that folks can keep in mind. Obviously, the first and the last step are the same, but in the middle there, we're going to add a little more detail. When we're working with those who report to us, we make the path clear. We make sure that those who are being delegated to understand what needs to be done, all facets of it. And at the same time, we outline regular check-in points when that individual could come back to us just to give us an update on what's happening. Maybe it's weekly, maybe it's every 2 weeks, perhaps once a month. It'll totally depend on the scope of what's being delegated. But the idea is that they know exactly what needs done, and they are left to go do that, checking in at regular times. And I should add one more thing here. They know that they can come to you when they have questions. This is what good managers do. They keep that door open. Questions are not a bad thing. They don't make somebody afraid to come ask questions, and that is very true with delegating as well. So this is how it's done. And this is what real delegation means: making the path clear, giving a set check-in points, and just letting people do it. You don't swing by the office and say, oh, let me know how that thing's going. I know we have a meeting next week for this, but I'm just curious now. No, none of that. Good managers just let people do their thing. Does this make sense? How awesome would it be if every manager would do this? I'm just curious what you think about that. Does it sound like a strategy that might work? Or if there's something that should be added, go ahead and bring that in. Oh, I'm hearing a bunch of amens. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I kind of think so too. It needs to be done more. Good managers do this. We don't see enough of it. And so thank you for Susan for just giving me the big amen on that. Obviously, we do want to delegate to the strength, and thank you for bringing that up. I should mention this as well. I know that sometimes managers will think, well, they need a person needs to get better at something, and so they'll delegate in an action or a task that maybe isn't in their strength area. Let's take public speaking for a moment. Maybe somebody on the team isn't so strong at that, and they say, well, in order to get better, I think they need to make presentations to the local branches about some procedure. And somebody who doesn't want to do public speaking may just quit. I mean, honestly, especially in that type of thing, there are folks who would rather just show up sick every day than be required to speak in front of others. So that's not the way to delegate. You don't just say, okay, go, sink or swim. The suggestion I would have is you partner that person up with somebody who is comfortable with that speaking assignment, who could go to the other branches, and maybe some of the time, add in the other person who's not so comfortable with it. But it would be when they are comfortable doing it. And here's how it would usually work. The first couple presentations, the comfortable speaker will do all the talking. After maybe 3 or 4 of those, the one who's not comfortable with it is going to say, you know what, I got this part. For 1, they've seen it done. 2, they're probably more expert in the topic area. And 3, well, after so much just sitting there, it's time to action. And so they'll take that step. And you've turned them in from, I'm never going to speak in front of anybody ever, to, after time, perhaps being comfortable with it. So that's my suggestion for delegating, even to an area that might not be their strength, is go ahead and make that delegation, but not in a sink or swim scenario, but partnering up with somebody who has the competence, who can show them a better way to go, or just help them become comfortable in it. All right, so there it is, real delegation. Good managers know how to do it, and they do it. Now, Our fourth area, taking action. Remember back earlier in the session, I mentioned this area of awareness. And on the team level awareness, there's sometimes stress in the workplace that's not caused by the work. And unfortunately, this is all too common. We've got people who seem to come to work for other reasons. Focusing on the work is not one of their strong points. And this can be a distraction to the team. It is a distraction to the team. And here's where we get to the list, especially of what was mentioned at the first of the session. I asked, what are some of the behaviors we've seen from managers that weren't so good? Well, we also see this on the team level as well with coworkers. Things like, okay, what do we got? We got liars, we got credit takers, and we got lazies and crazies. Perhaps we got sarcastics and gossips, users and abusers. Perhaps we've got passive and aggressive. And we've even got the passive aggressive. Does that sound, I don't know if any of you have ever seen this before. Maybe it's just me. And when you've seen this, and I hope you haven't seen it too much, but I know it's out there, the less effective manager will say something like this. That sounds like something you and he need to take care of, or the two of you need to get that worked out. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, it does. Thanks, Chrissy. I appreciate your input there, and Ann and Dwight as well. It is. It's unfortunately familiar. Good managers will not take these steps. They will not absolve themselves of things that are going on within the team that could be fixed. All right. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy fix. I am saying it's time the good managers take steps to make sure this isn't affecting the team long term. Because it can have an impact. So the silly question is, have you had enough of this? And of course we have. None of us like to see it, right? Sarah's saying that once she had a manager blame her for raising the issue of consistently late employee. Yeah. See, it's just crazy. The different things that managers, not good managers, who really don't want to take the right steps, will say or do to avoid this. But again, we're here to talk about the good managers and being a good managers. And so these are the steps that need to be taken, because it really is. It's so important that they are dealt with. Productivity, morale, effectiveness in the workplace, more reasons and more research than I have time to mention, all say take action. They don't allow these things. And now here's a fairly straightforward procedure. Again, this is definitely the Reader's Digest version. All right, this topic is so huge. There's books out there on it. I've wrote a book on this myself, because it was a follow-up to the first book, because this area was so large and so important. But it boils down to this: the 3 steps of that good managers will take in one form or another for minimizing the non-work related stress that might go on a team. With the team, without the team, whatever's best for the situation, we'll create a list of the desired and the unacceptable behaviors. The list of desired and unacceptable behaviors. 2 different lists. All right. And again, I'd recommend using the team in creating this list, but some teams are so dysfunctional that that can be a challenge. And even if you ask somebody to help with this, they're going to get grief for helping to do something that might actually fix. So good managers kind of know what the situation is and move forward accordingly. Now, after it's clear what's desired and what's not acceptable, the next 2 steps are pretty straightforward. We promote the desired behaviors, encourage what we want to see, and we discourage the unacceptable. Now again, I totally know that I am oversimplifying what has to happen or what good managers do to ensure their team is working as effectively as possible, that non-team player behavior is not coming into play. There may be one person on a team who takes up a manager's, way too much of the manager's time. I get it. It happens. And I know I've heard it all. Protected classes, or we're a labor union shop, or this is a government operation, and there's just no way it's going to happen. These things are a great idea, Dr. Groh, but good luck. And to that, I typically say only this: I get that there are difficult situations for managers. I do. I also know, though, that most organizations have procedures on the books that are there to help managers create the most effective team possible by bringing down the impact that a non-team player might have. The procedures are there, and sometimes they may be laborious, they may take a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of effort, but they wouldn't be on the books if they weren't there to be used. Now, that said, I also know there are no-win situations, that even if the procedures are there, that there are family operations, and there's a family member on the team that you could never possibly say, no, they got to go. No, Uncle whoever is not going to go. It's a family-owned operation. He's a family member. That's the way it is. Or a friend of the boss, or a friend of the owner. Maybe it's even the owner that has the problem. Well, guess what? The owner's not going to go anywhere. So there are these situations, which then means the manager themselves, we have to decide for ourselves, are we willing to stay in those situations? Not maybe, I'm here to say I don't have all the answers, but I am here to say that good managers will do what they can to minimize non-team player behavior. And in situations where they can't have an impact, they sometimes look for places where they can. And this is a personal decision. I know it's not an easy decision, but that's what sometimes happens. Are there other ideas that come to mind here? I know that some people are as Susan has said, sometimes 80% of the work done by 20% of the people. Or it's that 80-20 rule that applies to a lot of things in life. And this is true. This is kind of the thing we're talking about. Good managers, tend to do what needs done to even out these percentages, right? Chrissy says that perhaps even 10% might be the ones doing all the work. Well, again, take the steps that would be necessary to even out that workload. This is what good managers do. Not, without a doubt, not the easiest thing to be done. But we have to ask, why managers get paid more in general? Well, I would say it's perhaps one of the biggest reasons is to do this when it needs done. So thank you for your input on that. The last item, the fifth area where behaviors that good managers get right is kind of related to this. And I'm going to talk to you personally, managers. I like to cite it as the area of you communicate. And for this, we're talking about small adjustments. All right, it's connected to the topic that we just addressed, where action might be necessary. But before action, or maybe the very first step, is when you first see things that might need an adjustment, well, you talk it out. You let that be known. So before I go any farther, I definitely want to clarify this as well. What are some things that you might consider small things that, if left unchanged, could turn into bigger issues? Let's hear what you have to say about that. Do we have more music? Would you check that out? I know the responses are still coming in, so we'll give that a few more minutes. The early replies had to do with bullying. Bullying is not a small thing. Just my personal feeling is the moment that is seen, I've seen good managers bring a person aside as soon as possible to address that. But it can start small, little quips, little sarcastic comments. And maybe these are the small things that are meant that yeah, some things, this is what bullying will do. They'll test the water. And if they can get away with a small comment, a sarcastic thing, or a joke at somebody else's expense, then it gets bigger. And as was just said, sarcasm can turn into disrespect. It is somewhat a form of disrespect. And yeah, left unchecked, it will get bigger. This causes all kinds of problems in the workplace, problems that need to be addressed before they get out of hand. Training that an employer might need, also very much part of the situation. Maybe the reports aren't coming in the way they need to, or there's some small errors, and it could be just a matter of training. But the way to find out is to have the conversation. Individuals who maybe don't take responsibility for what they've done. Thank you, Madeline, for bringing that up. So many, and you're all seeing the replies here, and which is great because all these things can apply. Most of them are small, but if left undiscussed, they become big, and good managers don't let it get to that. So, as I've already kind of alluded to, what do good managers do? They talk. They have these conversations. They talk, they talk, they talk. Now, they don't talk like the guy here in Office Space, our old friend Bill Lumberg, character, the boss from Office Space. They do better than that, but they do have this conversation, right? And the conversation, there's a couple ways that I typically recommend, certainly timely, like Diana is suggesting. Couple strategies I like to suggest. The first one, build a sandwich. All right, maybe I just like food too much, so this is why it comes to mind. And I know that many have perhaps heard this strategy already, so here it is, just as a reminder. You have a conversation with the individual. Now, again, this is not something you'll have as you're walking down the hallway. It is not something you see. The good managers see the person in the break room and say, "Oh, by the way," or yeah, as our friend here, Bill, would do. Yeah, by the way, that TPS report. No, it's not just happening as on the side. They set aside time. It's known that it's important. They will not be doing it in a conversation sandwiched in between the company bowling team stuff and the annual picnic coming up. No, it's a set aside time made specifically for this topic. And the conversation is rather simple. Let's take the tardiness. Tardiness has come up more than once in the seminar by those participating. And so let's take coming to work on time. Start with something good. Always a compliment. Just that first layer of bread. Not a bad way to start any conversation. Compliments will always work. Yeah. And let's go with I don't know, Zeta. Okay, Zeta. I really love the way you're bringing a great spirit to the office. The flowers are fantastic. I appreciate whatever the compliment is. It needs to be genuine. Okay, it's not, hey, that's a great tie you have on. No, it needs to be specific and genuine. Okay, but just compliment that, or even if it is an element of the work that you're speaking of, that's fine. Let's talk about the timeliness of the reports, for example. I like the way you get those reports on time. That's very important and needs to be done. One way we can prove on that is you fill in the blank. Now, do not start this second phrase with the word but. All right, but is basically a verbal eraser. It tells the person consciously or unconsciously everything you said in that first sentence is not so important. Here's what you really want to talk about. No, you're building a sandwich. All right, so this is important. You give that compliment, you start the conversation with that. You move into what needs to improve with an and, or what will help even more is. Another thing I'd like to see is, right? It's the build, it's not the but. All right. Make it specific, and then that third phrase, kind of that final piece of yummy, yummy sandwich, bread. That statement of encouragement, right? The person can do it, and that it needs to happen. Because I also know that some people will hear the first and the last statement, and they'll kind of ignore the meat. I mean, you may have created good managers, a Philly cheesesteak, delicious, huge bread with lots of meat in the middle for what needs to improve. And yet, for some reason, some people go away just hearing the first and the last comment. So the way I tend to think it helps more is to set aside the time specific for it. It's not just a passing conversation in the hall or in the break room or by the water fountain, whatever the case may be. And have them repeat back, if you will. So what might we do to work on this? So obviously, additional conversation might include what are the strategies that will help for this, and the check-in, the check-back. This is not just a one-time conversation. We will follow up. All right, these things send the message. It's important. All right, still at the informal level. We don't want it to get to a formal report. We don't have to. Just stuff that needs to change. All right, next strategy. Thank you, Claudia. I hope that would help anybody. And here's the second model that might work. Very individually based. There's tons of literature out in the world about how to have conversations. Two of the most common ones are Crucial Conversation by Patterson and Patterson's group. Another one on the market now is Fierce Conversations. And fierce in this sense is like fierce friends, or those who you do anything to help out. So it's a book I came across not too long ago that looks like it's some good stuff in there about having conversations. They are, one of their core elements is having a foundation of respect and trust with the individuals, such that when you have these conversations, they're not taken as, oh, why do you have it out for me, or why are you picking on me? But rather, from a good manager's perspective, here's how I want to help you. I want to help you do better. And if the training is had beforehand, so that the team members know that what I share is to help you. And I assume, this is good manager speaking, good manager thinking, I assume that you would rather know than not know. Personally, that's how I feel. Excuse me. Because in my way of thinking, surprises are fantastic for holidays or for my birthday. But when it comes to a review time and a review interview, that one-on-one time with the manager, if I ever get sprung with something that I was never talked about before the fact, I'd have a problem with that, and I suspect you would too. Can I get an amen? Right. So remember, good managers know that surprises are fine for holidays and birthdays, but they stink when it comes to providing information that can help a person do better at their job. And so we communicate that. And yes, it does communicate respect, Diana, and thank you, Latrice, for the amen. It's so true, and it's not done often enough. So good managers keep this in mind. As you are a good manager, you will keep this in mind. And again, I think there's a lot of perhaps training before the fact with all team members that personally I think we all need correcting at some point. We're not all perfect. We're all still learning. And that sharing of information, which is all this is a good thing. It causes change. Change is growth, and growth is good. All right, so keep these things in mind. as you work with individuals. This is what good managers do. Yeah, and thank you, Susan, for that input. Um, we are good managers are in place to help others do well also. So let's sum this up. There are several common behaviors that good managers will typically have. It is a rewarding service that can be provided to any team, and if done well, I'd say it's even party-like. Now, you see the letters there on the left side. It's going to help you remember the 5 elements we discussed today. It's a matter of knowing personnel versus people, and you're working with people. Good managers are aware of what's happening with their individual team members, with their team as a whole, and the team behavior in the organization in the field. They practice real delegation. And again, you know what those steps are. They take action when action is necessary. And for you, as you are a good manager, when you see something that should be addressed, you don't wait, you don't put it off, you don't ignore it, you communicate these things. These are the 5 areas that I believe can help any manager go from okay to better, and from better to really good. And I'm open now for questions if you have them. I won't bother with the Jeopardy music at the moment. Well, thank you, Susan. I appreciate your compliment. And Chrissy as well. All right, we'll make sure, and this was a recorded session. We will make sure and put a link. We'll have this hosted. I think the university library will take care of it. And we'll make sure and send this email to everyone who had registered for the session. And feel free to pass the link along to others. It will certainly be an open link for others to watch. Let's see, we have a question. Was it Sarah that brought this in? Yeah. Suggested that one doesn't manage down, but also up. That staff can play a role in leading their supervisors. Question. Okay. Staff can play a role in leading their supervisors. Any tips on this? That's the tricky area. And Susan, you've hit the one area that would take up all day long if we had it. I would say if for those who are in situations where they have managers who are not practicing good management strategies, the very first thing to keep in mind, and this is for one's own professional safety, is and one thing we might never have control over is other people. So what others might do or not do to improve their own managerial behavior, it's not the subordinate's role to see that that happens. Now, that doesn't answer the question. That's just kind of before I get into anything. I like to remind people of this because I just know too many situations where those very well-meaning team members who just want to see things go a little better bring these things up. And as was mentioned even in this seminar here, the one who brings the message up sometimes becomes the casualty, all right? And we don't want that for any of you. The best ideas I've ever had are building that relationship of trust with a manager who may not be the most comfortable or confident in their situation. But if there's a relationship there where on a one-on-one basis, information could be shared with, here's how I think things might go better with the team. Here's what might help us all understand our roles. That if it's coming from a position of trust between the manager and the employee, there's a chance. But again, this is certainly something that needs to be considered on a case-by-case basis. I, not too long ago, wrote an article, a blog for our university site, should one go around the manager? And this is what the question was to me. A reporter asked this question, and I responded in a way that the reporter probably didn't like, is I would just encourage managers to create environments where employees feel they don't feel they have to go around a manager. That's perhaps extreme stuff. That's not what you're talking about here. But if I gave you any tip at all, it would be ensure that there is a trust between employee and manager, and when these kind of conversations are felt necessary or it seems right, if there's that feeling of trust between the two, then there's a hope of a brighter tomorrow. Does that help? All right. Again, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your involvement today. It was a pleasure working with you. And any questions? I think you'll all know how to get a hold of me. I'm easy to find online. Have a wonderful rest of the day.